Hey, thanks again for listening on another episode of Triple Play. Don't forget to
like, subscribe, share, support.
I love all that. Yep. And don't forget to support those that support us. That starts with Andy McCollum and those guys with Resource One at 636-458-1798. If you have any financial planning needs, give those guys a holler. We trust them, so should you. Also, Chris and CS Design, they did our intro, outro, the website, the new intro, outro for our new series, Beyond the Rings, which don't forget to check that out on Saturdays at 8 a.m. with your family sometime over the weekend. It's an 8 to 10-minute story about the Olympics and sharing faith and all sorts of crazy encounters that Jeff Wells has had. Actually, if you go out to a social media, plug in for that too. You'll see a skinny Jeff. I saw that last night. He posted one. He's like, check out my first episode that dropped last week. And I'm like, dude, that doesn't even, I barely remember when you were that thin. So he was like thin like you, Scott.
He's not thin anymore.
No, it was fun. It was fun. All right. And then don't forget to support Jeff Earhart. I got to hang out with that guy last night as he was doing security at the church. He's a good guy. Give those guys at State Farm a call at 314-821-5333 or, come on, Scott.
821 Jeff.
For any of your insurance needs.
Nailed.
And lastly, we're excited about our new partnership with Brookes Bible College. If you know anybody wanting to go to Bible college, wanting to get solid theologically, wanting to grow in the Lord, man, check it out. I just can't recommend it enough. We've said it, we'll say it again. Average church size, 75 to 100 folks. You're not going to do pastoring a church like that with literally thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars in debt. You can't. You just can't. The math doesn't add up. So check out Brookes Bible. They're accredited. You'll get a college degree. They just do biblical studies and counseling. So you're going to get a very concentrated college experience, and you will thank me later for it because we're excited about that partnership. But that said,
Who we got today?
Today, we got a fun guy. We've been discussing a lot of stuff because this guy is a unique character too, man. So he's got a lot of fun stories we were chatting about. But his name is Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacob is a contributor with the FS Redbird Rants. If you haven't checked them out, we highly recommend them, especially if you're a Cardinal fan, because I check it out all the time. That's how actually I connected with you through social media, because I kept reading and agreeing often with you. You have a lot of good assessments. I love the way I see you, and maybe you think this is wrong, but actually when I see your writing, you remind me of a young Bernie Michaelis. Am I saying his name? I never butcher his last name, but I like Bernie a lot. I read a lot of his stuff. You seem to really do a lot of research. You're not necessarily making prediction, but you're saying, hey, here's some people and here's some prognosis is what kind of makes sense. And of course, we all have what we think they should do. What we love them to do, because I mean, they just go on a spinning spree and become LA. But that said, that is a really cool thing. So Josh Jacobs writes there. He's also a brother in Christ. He's a pastor over in Illinois for a church. And so that is a fun aspect as well. So we share that in common with the three of us. And but tell us a little bit about where you grew up. Tell us a little bit about, where you went to school, the good old St. Louis question, maybe a little bit about your testimony, and then your passion for the Cardinals. And then we got to dive into a lot of Cardinal questions, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So.
Let's do it. So I'm from Central Illinois, Bloomington Normal. It's basically smack dab in between St. Louis and Chicago. So was born in Georgia, but pretty much grew up there my whole life. And I went to Lincoln Christian for half of my college degree, and then finished up at Moody Bible Institute. Highly recommend. But I love this partnership you guys have here, and you were talking with it before. So that's some good stuff. My testimony, I was one of those families that kind of went to church for 3 straight weeks and then didn't go again for 6 months of your life. And so kind of knew the Bible stories, kind of went to the church camps, kind of did the thing. And then just some life situations happened. So parents divorced in 6th grade. So single mom home for a while. Kind of was just lacking purpose and direction. I was never a bad kid. I didn't get into the drugs, alcohol, party scene type thing. But I was really depressed, anxious, lonely. But I had always I was if you asked me if I believe in God, yeah, I did, but it wasn't much more than a statement and something I thought about maybe when I was sad. And then I just had some guys at school, junior high, high school, that were always inviting me to come to stuff and always loving on me, pouring into me. And then when I turned 16, I had a license, had a car, and decided, okay, I'm going to drive myself to a small group. And where a lot of those guys had been key influences in my life for a long time. And then like pretty much within weeks was like, yep, Jesus is the main thing for me. I want to make my whole life about him. The Holy Spirit's just doing some radical work in me. And like my parents both have their own faith journeys too. So my dad was pouring into me a lot of that too. My parents as well, or my mom and stepdad as well. And then I'd say like late high school, just had this encounter with the Holy Spirit at a church camp, kind of like that typical, that story there, and just felt like a 180 in my life. And so decided really quickly I wanted to go to Bible college because I wanted other people to experience God in the way I have too, and to feel his presence and to follow him with all their life. And so when I went to school for that, and then in 2019 was hired at my home church, Eastview, and was one of the junior high pastors for there. And then now I work with our young adults. So it's like mostly young professionals. The area where I'm from, we have State Farm, we have Rivian, that new electric car company, a bunch of different larger organizations around. So we're pretty much a hub for college students and young professionals. And so I do a lot of ministry with that, and then do some preaching at one of our campuses as well. And so that's been, I mean, just Jesus is everything. I love Cardinal baseball. I could talk about it all day, but like the main thing is Jesus. And I love that I get to use the writing and everything that comes with it as a platform through that, and to build connections through that. And I just, when I stumbled across your guys' stuff too, like I was like, this is just such a cool concept of the podcast too, and how you guys cover sports, you cover culture, and you cover faith, and you bring it all together in a beautiful way. And so I'm just really thankful to be here with you guys today.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
I got a quick question. Do you have a brother, sister?
Yeah, I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters. Yeah.
Is one of them named John?
No.
Okay. I read your name, I think John Jacob.
Yeah.
I'm sure you never heard that.
Oh no. Yeah, I've heard that one quite a bit, which is good. Or I'll get called Jacob a lot because my last name's Jacobs and the alliteration, but it happens. So
it's awesome.
That's cool. That's cool. So, your passion for Cardinals, how did that, obviously you could have chose the Cubs or White Sox, but you chose the Cardinals. So what happened? What was the influence there?
My dad growing up, he was a huge Cardinal fan. He's from Decatur, Illinois. And so from his dad too. And so it got passed down to me at a very young age. And so probably I'm 25, so I'm not that old, but probably one of my first main Cardinal memories is the 2006 season. I probably remember stuff before then, but I mean, when you're that young, everything blends together. So like just right away I got into baseball. My dad's a golf pro, so golf and baseball are the 2 big things for me. And so yeah, he's, I mean, through and through, he's like, I mean, just as obsessed as I am, if not more. And so he grew up watching the 70s, 80s, 90s teams, and so passed that down to me right away. And there was no question I was going to be a Cardinal fan. He was not going to let me be anything else. And I'm so glad. I think there was maybe a time where I was on like the T-ball Cubs team. And so I was like, maybe I should be a Cubs fan. And he's like, no way. I'll make you stop playing T-ball if you're going to become a Cub fan.
Good choice.
Yeah, man, the Cubs just made a good move.
I know. Yeah.
You got to be, I mean, if you're a Cubs fan, you got to be excited that they recognize that leadership matters. And they went out and got a really, really good manager. You see that?
How do you feel about managers? Because I feel like that's the big debate right now, is that like, how much does a manager matter?
Yeah, it matters at almost none until it matters. I think what I mean is I think a manager is kind of like the face of a team. So if you have a nice face, pleasant, like treats players well, I think he's not going to win or lose games. But if you have a manager that's overly involved, is really trying to be smart in baseball, he can really lose a lot of games. I mean, you only have to lose 7 games as a manager, make really, really dumb decisions that lose and you literally flip your season by those 7 games. So a manager can make a big difference if they're really bad.
Yeah.
Well, and I think you said a couple key things in what I just heard you say, which is you have to be a good relational guy. You have to be able to get along with the players, but you also have to understand their weaknesses and strengths and not make dumb moves, right? I mean, part of it is understanding when a player needs to be pulled. And, you know, I mean, we all know pitchers that want to pitch another inning, but they're just not. The gas isn't there and they pitch another inning, this game's gone. but also understanding who you got behind that pitcher and are they prepared to be able to come in and step in and take care of the game and close it out.
Well, it's confidence.
Yeah.
You have a manager that's like maybe flip-flopping, you're in the outfield and you're like, man, as a player, like, man, that's a really bad decision. What are you doing? And it ends up being a really bad decision, hurting, and you have 3 or 4 of those through the year. Even if the manager ends up making a decent decision, your first instinct to go, well, is this? And that you don't want that. It's just like a ship. You have a shipmaster. They have mutinies. Why? Because people lose confidence in their ability to make good decisions.
Yeah, I think the thing that Craig Counsell, I mean, most people believe he's one of the top 3 managers in baseball right now. But what it signaled for me, especially the way they acquired him too, like kind of came out of nowhere last second. It's like Cubs bring in, they fire David Ross on the spot. It's like they're serious. And so at this point, I'm less scared about them getting Craig Counsell. I'm more like, are they going to be, is the Shohei stuff real? Is the Juan Soto stuff real? Is the Pete Alonso stuff real? And so pressure's on John Mozeliak right now. Like, come on.
Yeah, so let's get into that. The Cards are arguably had the worst season in a long time.
Yeah.
Okay. 20 years. And then we've got, Mozeliak has basically said this last contract will be his last with the Cardinals. So he's only got 2 more years on this contract. There's been talk about the DeWitt. I don't know, what you've heard, but I know there's been talk underground that the DeWitts have been slowly starting to assess the value of the Cardinals, and there has been underground talks that they may eventually put the team up for sale. I mean, it makes sense. I don't think the son, even though he has a position here, is near as passionate as dad, and dad's getting up there in age. Does it make sense at about the time that Jay Mozeliak in a couple years from now that they try to find a buyer locally and move on and cash in their $4 billion enterprise, right? So there's been all sorts of rumblings about different things. But that being said, the thing I think we can at least attribute is we had the worst season. Mozeliak's going to probably be gone in a couple of years. And so we are going into maybe one of the most important off seasons of his career because he inherited a good team. And he's been able to do what he's done for the last almost 20 years. But now we go into what is his legacy going to be? Because everybody remembers how he finished. If Albert had not finished last year the way he did, it would not have been the same.
Totally.
But he goes off in a sunset the way he did. Even Waino, if Waino hadn't had that last game that he pitched, how would his career have been? If he hadn't hit the total, if he hadn't had that just oomph to will his way through one more win, would we have really remembered it? Would he gone out in the sunset the way he wound up eventually being able to do? I mean, we all would have thought he was a good player, but it wouldn't have been the same. John Mozeliak, I think, is on that cusp. He just watched Albert. He just watched Waino. I think he's under the gun in a multiple different ways, not just to recover from last season, but to set what he's going to be remembered for as he rides off in a couple of years. Would you agree? Not agree? What are your thoughts on that?
I totally agree because I think Derek Gould caught the quote this week at the GM meetings that Mozeliak basically, he said himself, I don't really care about my legacy. This is not what this is about. Everyone cares about their legacy. Like, you can say that, but everyone wants to be remembered well. Like that's human nature. And so I think he sees this as the thing that coming into the offseason, I was encouraged that the DeWitts were making comments that they wanted to rise the payroll rankings. They wanted to spend differently. And now the conversation seems to be coming back, like backtracking. Are we doing 2 or 3 starters now? What is the quality of those starters? It's like, okay, now the rubber's meeting the road. You said you would meet the price of pitching, but now the price of pitching is out there. Is this posturing toward agents and other general managers, or is this how they're going to do it again? So I personally wonder how much John Mozeliak has his hands tied when it comes to especially payroll, but that doesn't defend the Ozuna trade. That doesn't defend the Randy Arozarena trade. Like those are things that were within his control. I do think that he sees 2024 as a need to rebound and get back in contention, but then he wants to set this team up for 2025, 2026 when he hands it off to whether it's someone internally or they bring in someone externally. Like part of his legacy also is going to be how does the team continue on after him? Because that's a lot of the criticism he's gotten as well. Walt Jocketty brought the team up that won the 2011 World Series. So like if it ends poorly and it starts off and people kind of give credit to Jocketty on that, then the middle years where they were going to NLCS but they weren't getting all the way through, they made it to the World Series in 2013 but they didn't win it. I think he has an opportunity here to change the narrative.
Well, and even 2013, I've heard it credited to Luau because a lot of those players were drafted to Luau, who obviously set a legacy in Houston and changed that organization. So I
wonder how much, because free agency is happening now. I wonder how much.
Did you guys see the news? By the way, I don't want to interrupt you, but the news this morning, the GM meetings were canceled.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, though. I just want to bring that up in the podcast because that's something interesting that plays into everything because this is where they lay a lot of groundwork, and now that's being stopped. So
I was just thinking if you're a free agent and you're looking at the Cardinals, all things equal, Chicago, Milwaukee, this whatever team you're going to go to, and maybe the price is $30 million, but you're looking at Chicago where they're committing to a manager for 5, 6, 7 years. Stability. They're kind of doing this around something. Maybe they've heard people don't want to come to the Cardinals. Mm-hmm. Hey, you got a manager. You've had 3 managers the last 5 years. Like this one, we don't know. Is he going to stick around? So people, how do you woo someone into this situation?
Yeah. And then you have Wilson Contreras, who so actively wanted to be a Cardinal, becomes a Cardinal 3 months in. His job is already taken from him too. So I'm like, that's not a great look. And then you have Jason Hayward, who they offered more money than the Cubs did, and he spurned them going to what he thought was going to be a contender. So I think it's a real thing. I don't know how people view St. Louis.
I don't think it's as big as you guys think, though, because there is the tradition. We always do compete for the most part, and we still got a decent core. I mean, Goldschmidt, and just a year ago, Goldschmidt and Arenado were runners-up, one, and one was the runner-up for MVP. So, I just think that, and everybody sees that Waino, they're going to attribute last year to Waino. We all know that was a big part of it. He made $20-something million. His last season, he was 41 years old. I don't, and this is where I think I tell a lot of people, I don't think the Cardinals look unattractive because you think about the pluses. We got 4 hitters. You got Goldschmidt, you got Gorman, you got Jordan.
I'm not talking about the pluses. I'm specifically the a manager. Like if you're going to a job, even if you're a lawyer and you're going to a top firm, you're going to meet the top lawyer and.
Well, I'm going to answer that. I
lawyers in and out, you'll be like, nah, that place is cool, but I can go here and I know who I'm going to work for the next 5 years.
I think that's being addressed in a different way because obviously I don't think they're going to put all their money against on the guy who's there right now. But I think that's where that Yachty thing has been coming in, where they're saying there's a 90% chance. Even he just said, I think just a week ago, that it's pretty much in the works that he's going to be joining that staff. And
why talk about that unless you want players to hear that? Why not just keep that internal and be like one day, hey, we hired him or we didn't hire him? Why is it a rumor kind of thing?
Well, it's not a rumor. They said that they had discussions.
I understand. Yeah. I'm not saying it's a rumor. I'm talking about why kind of. It's just kind of floating.
Yeah, I'm curious how much the Molinas, because 2 years ago, he's midway through the season going to Puerto Rico to watch his basketball team. So I do wonder if
what was that? That wasn't real. They never said. Did they say that's what it was?
That he was definitely in Puerto Rico for a while.
Okay.
So I think some of it had to do with the team. I don't know what all, but so when Mosaic talks about comments publicly about the Yachty thing, he always says we don't know what his time commitment is going to be. So I think that's a big thing. But it also sounds like I thought bench coach was going to be the natural role, but it sounds like they're bringing back Joe McEwing. Yeah, McEwing. So I don't know if it's a catching coordinator thing where he's in the dugout and then the first sign of Ollie Marmol's job coming, Yadier Molina's back in. I don't know how you guys feel about Marmol. That's probably a topic we could talk about, but I do think that Yachty's probably the manager.
What do you think about Marmol? Let's start there because let's start with the manager. I mean, here's the.
We've had discussions about Marmol.
Okay.
Yeah, well, and I would even say let's start with we got to go back before Marmol because I think this is when you were talking about the instability. You had Mike Matheny.
Yeah.
And he arguably mismanaged the bullpen. A lot of young rookie pitchers or managers do that. Your dad was talking about that when he was in here. So that being said, though, he did take him to 3 playoffs and 1 World Series in that period of time, and only had a half bad season, of which Mozeliak was the guy who signed most of those players that weren't performing. And it was when Mozeliak traded and got rid of most of them that the team reperformed. and brought up the young guys who he didn't think were quite ready yet. And so that said, and then he brings in Schilt.
Yep.
Schilt looks like he's about to be the manager of the Padres, which says something to him. He grew up in the Cardinals organization, leads them to 3 playoffs, goes to the second level, the first time in years that they'd gone got beyond a 1-game playoff wild card thing and actually made it to the second round against the beat the Braves, right? Made it the second round. And then the next year he's runner up for manager of the year and gets released. They bring in Marmol. But so I just want to lay the groundwork of that. And the other thing I always tell people in the background, I always ask people, who's the GM of the Cardinals? And almost nobody can answer that it's Gersh. And I always find that interesting because name another president as intimately involved as a GM on their team as JMO is. When we talk about those GM meetings, how much you want to bet that John Mozeliak is either nonstop on that phone or in those meetings right now? Okay, because even though he's a president, I think he's still a GM. And now I think he's in part of that management, part of putting his people in there. And I think that this is my personal opinion. I don't think that Mozeliak's a bad guy, but I think just like anybody else, you like to put people who confirm your decisions and not challenge them, which is some of what we've heard with the Schilt thing. And there seems to be some other things that have been around for a while, that he wants people who seem to justify his decisions and not challenge his decisions, which is, I think, why we are in the mess we had last year, is that nobody said, that's not a really smart decision there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I remember I was in a room with Mozeliak, would have been 2 summers ago. I just remember it vividly because it was the day that the Nationals offered Soto the extension. He declined it. So immediately you have the Padres and the Cardinals as the top 2 suitors at that deadline. Mozeliak talked about 2 things. One, that when he moved into the president of baseball operations role, that part of that was to start giving away responsibility to a Michael Gersh, to a Randy Flores, to all those guys. But then COVID happened, and so he took back most of that power because on a day-to-day basis, there were just decisions that were above their pay grade that had to be between him and the DeWitts and the ownership to try and figure things out. And then he was trying to figure out how to bring, or basically alleviate that power again. I would say, like what you pointed out, is it seems like he's very involved for a president of baseball operations. But I do think there's probably things that Gersh just does there are things he does that we don't know about. Like Jordan Montgomery trade was something that's been accredited to him a lot, with him working the phones with Brian Cashman. There's been some other things over the years too that, like, when you get down to it, like Gersh has been one of the head points of, when it comes to like an Ollie Marmol, I don't think he's a great manager. I wouldn't try to advocate like that, but I also think like the 2-year sample size we have is he brought the team to the playoffs. And if you like remember where they were at midseason, like they had to bring in Quintana and Montgomery because the rotation was in just shatters. And so like that team, there was even a question mark if they're even going to make the playoffs at that point. Turn around and make it in. Obviously, you could give a lot of credit to Yachty or Pujols, but then the next year, if we get back to the problem, or if we get to the problems that the 2023 Cardinals face, roster construction, like I kind of bought into the idea that the rotation could make it to the deadline and they'd have to find a number 1 guy, figures things out, but it just didn't work. And I'm not sure Craig Counsell takes that team to the playoffs. I'm not sure Bruce Bochy takes that team to the playoffs. And maybe I'm wrong on that. I just think that team was set up for failure from the beginning. And I think it's clear in Mozeliak's comments on the team too, that he isn't placing the blame on Ollie, that he continuously comes back to say, like, we bet on this and we were wrong. And so I do think you have to put Ollie in a short leash though going into the season, but I wouldn't put the blame on him necessarily. But again, I'm not in the clubhouse. It doesn't, like, when like a Gould or a Wu, where people talk about, no one really seems to think that there's issues with Marmol. Like obviously the Tyler O'Neill stuff blew up, and there's
and then you said the Contreras thing. I mean, those are some things that I think of and
those were early on this past season.
Yeah, those. And when we had I
don't think a Bochy has a moment like that.
Yeah, that's true. And because then it came out later that the pitching staff was kind of what drew that, where they kind of came to Marmol, they came to Mozeliak around Wilson Contreras to get him out. And it's like, does a strong leader prevent something like that from happening? So I see both sides of it.
Well, I'm going to go back, and even another part of that. does a strong leader not prepare his pitchers for life after Yachty?
Yeah.
Because, we just had a pitcher who pitched Yachty, and he said there's nobody he's ever pitched like him. He knew exactly what to call. He only pitched him one or two times, but, it was amazing, he said. And what I will say is, I think as an organization, they didn't prepare well because pitchers everywhere else called their pitches. Everybody just trusted Yachty because that's just how good he was, and they got complacent on that. I think another thing that, we talked about the cohesiveness of calling him out. I think that was a rookie mistake. But I think also the fact that Marmol was confident in his staff. Now he gets to help have a say in his staff. And I think that was a major weakness of him this year because the pitching coach of the Cardinals the year before that we somehow just won a World Series. Okay. I'm just saying. And Bochy down there gives him a lot of credit on a lot of those pitching things. And then Jordan Montgomery comes out and says, the reason why I had a lot of success my first half season with the Cardinals and I struggled a little bit more this next season was the difference of Maddox. So just
what was his ERA this year?
Who's that?
Just flew out of my brain. The guy we were talking about, the 41-year-old,
Bueno?
Bueno. What was his ERA this year?
It was bad.
It was bad. So even I just cannot emphasize enough how much that drug down that team this year. Like 20% of your games. 20% of your games you're going, yeah, whatever. I guess we're just doing this year. Like I saw teammates not even just after he won his 200th, I don't give a shit. I don't care you did that. I saw those not high fives or the little, I guess I'll do this because I got to kind of things after the. So I just, yes, all that aside, but I think that was way bigger than anybody's even saying because it's, who says that? He got his 200, he's riding off in sunset. Well, what did that cost the season this year?
Yeah, I don't know where he ended up finishing, but I remember when he was sitting on 198 for 2 months, they were talking about out of qualified pitchers, he had a bottom 5 ERA of all time for a single season. It was terrible. And then you have Jack Flaherty the first half who would go give you 6 strong one day and then give up 8 runs in 2 innings the next day. Michaelis was off. Matz was hurt. And then when he was healthy,
Michaelis was, everybody wanted the Michaelis from a year before, and that's not who he'd been the other previous 2 or 3 seasons. Yeah. He's had 2 good seasons in 5, and they thought, somehow this guy was going to be the ace stuff he had last year. And I thought that was a weird expectation from the get-go. I expected him to that was a really good year last year, and he's 34 years old. A lot of 35, 36-year-olds. There aren't named Justin Verlander and Scherzer, who have had 3 decently middle great years.
And the Yachty effect, you have to expect that your pitchers aren't going to do as well.
That's the thing that's crazy to me is they spent all off season and actually the last 20 years telling us Yadier Molina, you cannot replicate him. He's one of a kind. And then they basically expect Wilson Contreras, who's not even a defensive catcher, to come in and be Yadier Molina. You can't have both things be true at once. So, but a lot of that stuff, I'm like, okay, how much of that is Ollie Marmol and how much of that is top-down leadership? And I just think a lot of I think no one's abstained from the issues this year, but I would point to the front office and ownership for a lot of it. But again, if they put a quality team around them this year, they have no excuses. They have to go out and win.
Yeah, there was I saw some questionable things, in my opinion, from a managing point of view, just confidence things and little things. So I don't think that Marmol's a bad guy. I just think he's inexperienced. Yeah. And so that's what I would say is and I don't know if the Cardinals are going to be able to be patient enough for him to catch that learning curve, especially, and this is the other part, and that's where I was going with Maddox, because you had a rookie pitching coach this year.
Yeah.
Okay. Rookie bench coach, basically. You had Shoop the year before. Yeah. And obviously we've seen what he's done because he took his team to the playoffs, right? So, those things matter. Those things, those little whispers in your ear, it's time to pull that guy. We need to be a little more aggressive here, especially from veterans who've played or been around the game as much as Maddox and Shoop had been. We're good people for a guy like Marmol to have, and so I think some of that success might have been the success that he had. You know, a good leader has good people underneath him, right?
Yeah, which is something I actually really respected about him. Is year one he brought in Skip Schumacher. Year two his plan was Matt Holliday, and Matt Holliday decided to have he had family stuff. That makes sense. It's okay. So they brought in Joe. Year three he's open to they're not going to bring in Yachty if Ollie's not signing off on it. Otherwise they're going to make that change right away. That's asking for a catastrophe to start the season. So the fact that he's open to surrounding himself with great voices is something that I think is a sign of someone who, even if he isn't a great leader right now, is someone who has the tools to be a great leader. I think the experience part's probably a great point of that too, is that, I mean, he was around the big league club for a little bit, but I mean, it's different being at the helm.
Well, it's different having a guy like Maddox in your ear about pitching. I mean, I really thought their pitching coach was going to be fired. At the very least this year, I thought that guy should be gone. Maybe not. You don't necessarily have to get rid of him out of the organization, just demote him. I don't. You know, he was promoted within, and maybe it's time for him to go back to being a different position in the organization and bring in somebody who's a veteran that knows how to handle their pitching situation maybe a little bit better. Maybe they have more confidence in him than I do. But when I looked at pitchers last year, I thought the fact that they went to Marmol and would have said, "Hey, we have this problem with Contreras," I would have thought a good pitching coach would have said, "Guys, let's figure this out. Let's work through this." And this is he knows what he's doing. He's a veteran catcher who won a World Series. So, and he did it with some pitchers. Most of those pitchers never had good years after him. Okay, when they left, they never, and so there has to be something there. You know, we got recommended by a pitcher that pitched in St. Louis just 2 years ago and had a record second half with Yachty, and he recommended him in Lester. So you don't get other pitchers recommending a guy like this unless he's a decent catcher.
I noticed the one thing that the Rangers talked about is how they were all they did everything together. The one thing they said is they played cards. Bochy fostered whatever atmosphere where they all wanted to do something together. I think Marmol's locker, it's you got this group, you got that group, you got this group, and when something happens, this group tells that group or this group. I think a good manager
or brings in players to complement that. That was one of the Cardinal issues before 2011 was they were all about the Cardinal way and they were so serious. The Alberts and all them were all serious and no play that they brought in Berkman, who was a believer, who was a veteran, but he loosened up that's when they started having the dress up days. He would get everybody dressed up and brought in some of that cohesive goofiness within the locker because you had people who were mentoring and helping each other out, but the word that I heard was concrete. There was no flex in there, and so he kind of came in and loosened up the clubhouse and brought that cohesiveness. They were, kind of loosened some things up behind the scenes to everybody. So, and that, credit to, and they brought him in, they said for that. I mean, they understood that was one of the things he would help do. And that was one of the reasons.
It's super important. It's super important. If you have groups in your locker room, you're not going to win.
Yeah.
Something else you both have talked about the experience side of it too. If a Bruce Bochy comes up to you and says he has the confidence in you to go into a game, that guy's won it before, right? And the way he rode Jordan Montgomery in the playoffs, it's that guy has done it with Madison Bumgarner before. So he's so if I'm Montgomery and I'm oh, you want me to be your Bumgarner? The difference between that and Ollie Marmol, who you just don't have a track record with too. I think there's just a lot of things going for you with the experience of a manager. But then I also think too, it's not to, I think there can be an old school, new school argument too. I think it's a what Bochy did this year and Dusty Baker has done over the last few years is just a beautiful hybrid of both. The Rangers, the Astros, the Phillies, the Braves, they're all analytically run organizations, but they don't let that be the end all be all of things. So maybe that's part of the issue too, is that, there's multiple times this year where you have Nolan Gorman on the bench and Alec Burleson. They're going to Alec Burleson with the bases loaded. And it's what? Yeah. I get he probably has the better expected numbers here, but you have Nolan freaking Gorman sitting on the bench right now. Or there's just some weird moves like that where I wonder if the inexperienced manager goes with the numbers because he knows it's the right thing to do. And if he doesn't, then it's well, you went off your gut. What gut do you have? You don't have anything to prove that you're the right guy to make that decision.
Yeah.
So,
well, to your point, the perfect example, the Tyler O'Neill thing that happened, right? Tyler O'Neill's been in the big leagues. He went to the minor leagues. He played. He's been on second base, had a hit. One of his teammates had a hit to the left side, and he's rounded third, and he's scored before, and he's been thrown out before, and he's stopped before. He's done all that before, and he did the exact same thing he's always done, and he was running hard. He says, I believe him. There's no way he was going to score. Send him out. Like, and then you call him out. That Tyler O'Neill instantly lost all respect for him instantaneously. And then whoever Tyler O'Neill's friends with, Tyler O'Neill's talking to his friends about blah, 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 blah. And then so now you lose Tyler and then maybe one plus so that one event probably was like so you lost however many people on your team.
Yeah, the respect for and now you got to re-earn that all back, and that's hard to do. It's a lot harder to earn that back.
But to your point, Bochy says that maybe it's like maybe I didn't run as hard or, something.
Yeah.
You introspect a little bit, but when it's coming from a guy, there's no street kid, you're like, nah.
That's a valid point. I mean, that is a valid point. Fair enough. That's valid. So, I think we beat that horse a little bit.